My wife drained my bank account for her secret lover while I trusted her completely, so I filed charges and took custody of everything legally. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and for most of my adult life, I believed that trust wasn't just part of marriage, it was the marriage. Not trust with conditions. Not trust with constant checking. Real trust. The kind where you don't feel the need to look over your shoulder because you're convinced the person beside you would never stab you in the back. My wife and I built our relationship on that idea from the very beginning. Shared finances. Open phones. No secrets. We used to joke that we were boringly honest with each other. If one of us bought something, the other knew. If money moved, it was discussed. At least, that's what I believed. I worked long hours, early mornings, late nights, doing a job that drained me but paid well. I took pride in being the stable one. The provider. I liked knowing that my effort translated into security for us. Every paycheck felt like proof that I was doing my part as a husband. She handled most of the day-to-day stuff. Bills. Transfers. Budgeting. Groceries. I didn't see that as laziness on my part, I saw it as trust. She was organized, detail-oriented, better with numbers. Whenever I asked if everything was good, she'd smile and say, "Yeah, we're fine. Don't worry about it." And I didn't. Our friends admired us. They'd say things like, "You two are such a team," or "I wish my marriage was that solid." I remember sitting at dinners, listening to other couples argue about money, and feeling quietly proud that we never fought about it. I thought that meant we were doing something right. I never checked the accounts. Not once. Never questioned a transfer. Never logged in just to make sure. To me, love meant faith without suspicion. If I started checking, that meant I didn't trust her, and if I didn't trust her, what was the point of being married at all? I had no idea that while I was building my life around that belief, something else was being built behind my back, quietly, deliberately, and completely out of my sight. The first time something felt off, it was so small I almost laughed at myself for noticing. I got a notification about an overdraft fee on an account that, as far as I knew, never dipped anywhere near zero. I remember standing in the kitchen, still in my work clothes, staring at my phone while the smell of reheated leftovers filled the room. I mentioned it casually. "Hey, did something weird happen with the account?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't even look up from the couch. Probably a timing thing. A bill hit early. "I'll fix it." That should have been the end of it. And for me, it was. A week later, a few $100s was missing. Then another small amount. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed emergency. Just enough to notice and then explain away. Subscription renewals. Auto payments. Price increases. She always had an answer ready, delivered with a calm confidence that made me feel stupid for questioning it. Whenever I hesitated, she'd sigh and say things like, "Why are you stressing over money? We're fine," or worse, "Do you not trust me?" That question hit harder than it should have. I'd back off immediately. "No, of course I trust you," I'd say. And I meant it. So I covered the gaps myself. Quietly transferred money from my savings. Told myself this was what partnership looked like, stepping in without keeping score. I didn't want to be the guy who monitored his wife like an accountant. I didn't want to become controlling. I especially didn't want to become suspicious. Looking back, I can see how carefully she handled it. The amounts were never big enough to cause panic. The explanations were always just believable enough. And every time I let it go, something shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. Like a boundary moving an inch at a time. I didn't realize it then, but by choosing silence, I was teaching her something. I was teaching her that I wouldn't dig. That I wouldn't push. That I'd rather doubt myself than doubt her. And once that lesson settled in, the irregularities didn't stop. They started multiplying. Around the same time the money issues started, something else shifted, but I didn't connect the two. Not then. Emotionally, she began pulling away in ways that were subtle enough to explain, but sharp enough to hurt. She was always on her phone. Not scrolling mindlessly like before, but guarded. Tilting the screen away when I walked by. Locking it when she left the room. If I asked who she was texting, she'd answer too quickly. Just a friend. Work stuff. Nothing important. The warmth we used to have started cooling off. Conversations felt shorter. Laughs were rarer. When I tried to hug her from behind while she cooked, she'd tense slightly, then force a smile. At night, she'd turn away in bed, claiming exhaustion, stress, headaches, always something reasonable, always something I felt guilty questioning. When I finally asked if something was wrong, she looked at me like I'd offended her. "Why are you acting weird?" she said. "I'm just tired." "Not everything is about you." That sentence stuck with me. It made me shrink. Made me second-guess my instincts. So instead of pushing, I tried harder. I picked up extra chores. Planned small dates. Brought home her favorite snacks. Left sweet notes she used to love. I told myself marriages went through phases and that real love meant patience, not pressure. She accepted everything. The gestures. The money. The effort. But she didn't meet me halfway. There was always a slight emotional distance, like she was somewhere else even when she was sitting right next to me. I remember one night asking softly, "Are we okay?" She sighed, irritated. "Why do you always need reassurance?" That hurt more than I admitted. I started wondering if I was the problem. If I was too needy. Too sensitive. Too much. So I stopped asking. I stopped noticing. I told myself the emotional gap had nothing to do with the finances, nothing to do with us. I convinced myself this was just adulthood, stress, routine, normal marriage stuff. What I didn't know was that while I was working overtime to keep our life stable, she was emotionally investing somewhere else entirely. And I was getting closer to noticing whether I wanted to or not. The first time I felt genuine panic wasn't emotional, it was financial. I logged into our joint account one morning before work, not because I was suspicious, but because I needed to transfer money for a routine expense. That's when I saw it. A large transfer. Big enough that my stomach tightened instantly. I stared at the screen longer than I want to admit, refreshing it like it might disappear. The number didn't make sense. It wasn't rent. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't anything we'd talked about. When I asked her about it that evening, she hesitated just for half a second before answering. "Oh. That," she said. "A friend needed help. Emergency situation." I remember the way she avoided eye contact, folding laundry too carefully, like she needed her hands busy. "It's just a loan," she added quickly. "They'll pay it back." Every instinct in my body told me something was wrong. My chest felt tight. My thoughts raced. But instead of listening to that feeling, I did what I'd been training myself to do for months. I talked myself out of it. She softened immediately. Came closer. Touched my arm. "You trust me, right?" she asked quietly. I nodded before I even realized I was doing it. That night, she was affectionate in a way she hadn't been in weeks. Warm. Attentive. Almost relieved. And I hated myself for how easily that comfort erased my doubts. I remember lying in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, telling myself that marriage meant giving your partner the benefit of the doubt even when it was uncomfortable. I thought pushing harder would only damage us. I thought asking for proof would make me the villain. So I swallowed the fear and chose peace over truth. But something changed after that. The questions didn't disappear, they just went quiet. Buried under excuses and reassurance and my own desire to believe I wasn't being played. I told myself this was the last time I'd feel uneasy. That once the money came back, everything would settle. It didn't. And deep down, I knew I just crossed a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. The truth didn't come from some dramatic confrontation or confession. It came quietly, accidentally, on a night that was supposed to be completely ordinary. Her tablet was charging on the kitchen counter while her phone buzzed on the couch. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was just trying to stop the notification sound because it kept breaking the silence. When I picked it up, the screen lit up and a message preview flashed across it. I miss you. Last night wasn't enough. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. A joke. Someone else. Anything. But my hands were already shaking as I unlocked the tablet. I didn't even realize I knew her passcode until my fingers typed it from muscle memory. What I saw didn't feel real. Long threads of messages. Intimate. Casual. Familiar in a way that takes time to build. Pet names she never used with me anymore. Complaints about how exhausting her life was. About how generous I was. About how lucky she was to have someone who handled the boring stuff. And then I saw the messages about money. Did you get it? Yeah, he won't notice. I'll send more after his paycheck clears. I had to sit down. The kitchen felt too bright. Too loud. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I scrolled and scrolled, hoping for something, anything, that would explain this away. Instead, I found photos. Screenshots. Jokes about trips I paid for. Gifts I funded. A life I was unknowingly sponsoring. The friend. The emergency. The transfers. None of it was random. I remember whispering, "No," out loud, like saying it might undo everything. My hands went numb. My chest burned. I felt stupid. Exposed. Used in a way I didn't have words for yet. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a second life. And I was the one paying for it, with my money, my trust, and years of my life, without ever being invited into the truth. I didn't confront her right away. Not because I forgave her, but because something inside me went cold. The shock faded, replaced by a slow, sinking clarity. If this was real, and it was, then I needed to understand how deep it went. That night, after she fell asleep beside me like nothing was wrong, I slipped out of bed and sat alone in the dark living room. The glow from my laptop felt harsh against my eyes as I logged into our bank accounts properly for the first time in years. My hands were steady now. Too steady. I started going through statements month by month. At first, I hoped I'd find chaos. Impulse. Sloppiness. Something that suggested panic or poor judgment. Instead, I found planning. Transfers always happened a day or two after my paycheck landed. Amounts carefully spaced out, never enough to trigger alerts I'd notice immediately. Withdrawals timed around weekends I worked overtime. Purchases that lined up perfectly with the messages I'd read earlier. Hotels. Restaurants. Gifts. Rideshares in parts of town she never went to with me. This wasn't emotional cheating that accidentally became financial. The money was part of the relationship. A tool. A resource she controlled. The worst part wasn't the total, though it was staggering. It was realizing how intentional it all was. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't desperate. She was methodical. She knew exactly how much she could take without setting off alarms. I felt something ugly crawl up my spine. A mix of rage and humiliation that made my jaw clench until it hurt. I remembered every time she'd asked, "Do you trust me?" Every sigh. Every look that made me feel unreasonable. She hadn't just lied. She had studied me. I closed the laptop and sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the house feeling suddenly unfamiliar, like I was standing inside someone else's life. Upstairs, she slept peacefully, wrapped in the security I provided. And in that moment, the pain shifted into something sharper. This wasn't just betrayal of love. It was theft dressed up as marriage. And I realized I was living with someone who had no problem draining me dry as long as I stayed quiet. I confronted her 2 nights later. Not because I was ready, but because carrying the truth inside me started to feel heavier than the fallout itself. She was sitting at the dining table scrolling on her phone when I asked, "Who is he?" My voice didn't shake, which surprised me. She looked up slowly, annoyance flashing first, then confusion. "What are you talking about?" she said. I placed the printed bank statements on the table. Then the screenshots. One by one. I watched her eyes track the paper, watched her jaw tighten. "Stop being dramatic," she snapped. "You went through my stuff?" That was her first reaction. Not denial. Not remorse. Anger. I told her I knew about the messages. About the money. About how long it had been going on. She laughed, actually laughed, like I'd misunderstood a joke. "It's not what you think," she said. "You're twisting things." When I didn't back down, when I didn't apologize, something shifted. The color drained from her face. She sat back, hands trembling now, and finally said it. "I didn't think you'd ever find out." That sentence felt like getting punched in the chest. She cried after that, but not the way I expected. No apologies. No accountability. Just panic. "You were never around," she said. "I was lonely. He made me feel seen. Then, quieter, and you never needed the money anyway." I remember standing there, the room spinning slightly, thinking about every extra shift I'd worked. Every time I'd told myself I was lucky to provide. Every moment I chose trust over doubt. I asked her if she loved him. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. She finally said, "I didn't think it would go this far." That was it. That was rock bottom. The moment I realized the woman I slept next to every night didn't see me as a partner, but as a resource. A safety net. A fool who would never push back. I walked out of the room without another word, locked myself in the car, and sat there in the dark, shaking not from sadness, but from the terrifying clarity that nothing about my marriage was salvageable. And once that truth settled in, something inside me hardened. The next morning, I woke up empty. Not numb, hollow. Like the part of me that reacted had been switched off overnight. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't demand explanations. I made coffee, put on my work clothes, and left the house like everything was normal. That's when I knew something had changed. I stopped talking about feelings and started taking notes. Screenshots. Dates. Times. Account numbers. I emailed statements to myself from a private address she didn't know existed. I photographed receipts she carelessly left on the counter. I saved message threads to multiple devices. Every click felt surgical. Controlled. She tried to act normal, too. Almost cheerful. "Are we okay?" she asked one evening, watching my face too closely. I looked up from my phone and said, "Yeah. I just need some space." She nodded, relieved. That relief told me everything I needed to know. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer during my lunch break and sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel while he explained words like financial exploitation, fraud, documentation, custody implications. Hearing it framed legally, clinically, stripped the last bit of confusion away. This wasn't a messy marriage problem. This was a case. At home, I played my role perfectly. I didn't accuse. I didn't withdraw completely. I smiled when necessary. I answered questions. I let her believe the storm had passed. Meanwhile, I watched the accounts like a hawk. She kept spending. Transferring. Taking. She thought I was still blind, still the same man who equated love with silence. Every transaction felt like another thread tightening around her own wrists. At night, lying beside her, I felt the bed differently. The room sounded louder. Her breathing felt intrusive. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds, reminding myself not to rush. Because rage would have been easy. Strategy took patience. And patience, I was learning, was far more dangerous. By the end of that week, I wasn't wondering if I'd act anymore. I was deciding when. Once I started watching closely, the pattern became impossible to ignore. She didn't slow down, she got comfortable. Almost careless. Like she believed the danger had passed and the worst was behind her. Money kept moving. Smaller transfers at first, then bolder ones. Always just under amounts that would trigger obvious alarms. Always timed after my paycheck. I logged everything. Dates. Times. Descriptions. I built a timeline so detailed it felt unreal, like I was documenting someone else's crime instead of my own marriage. She talked more openly, too. I might go out this weekend, she said one night, not looking at me. With who? I asked. A friend, she replied quickly, the same word she'd used 100 times before. I nodded and went back to my phone, my heart steady in a way that scared me. Because this time, I knew exactly where the money for that friend would come from. My lawyer told me to let it continue. That every transaction strengthened the case. That intent mattered, and she was proving hers without being asked. Hearing that felt strange. Like I was standing on the edge of something irreversible, watching her dig deeper while believing she was untouchable. I set up alerts she didn't know about. Secured copies of records she thought were private. Made backups of backups. Every step felt heavy, but also empowering. For the first time since the discovery, I wasn't reacting, I was directing. She sensed the distance, I think. One night she asked, half joking, "You're not secretly mad at me, are you?" I smiled. Why would I be? That smile cost me something. But it bought me time. By the end of the week, my lawyer confirmed it, we had more than enough. Fraud. Clear misuse of joint assets. Documentation that couldn't be explained away by confusion or stress. I sat alone in my car afterward, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. The trap was set. She'd walked into it without being pushed. All that was left was to decide when to close it. And once I made that choice, there would be no going back. I didn't warn her. I didn't announce it. I didn't give her a dramatic speech or a chance to twist the story. One morning, after she left for what she said was brunch with a friend, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my phone, and a folder of evidence that felt heavier than it looked. I filed the report first. Financial fraud. Misuse of joint funds. I remember the officer's voice on the phone, calm, procedural, asking me to confirm amounts, timelines, intent. Hearing myself answer out loud made it real in a way screenshots never did. This wasn't anger anymore. This was action. Then I went to the bank. I locked down every account I legally could. Froze transfers. Changed access. Opened new accounts in my name only. The teller didn't ask many questions, but the look she gave me, a mix of sympathy and professionalism, told me she understood enough. When my phone started vibrating non-stop that afternoon, I didn't answer. Missed calls. Texts piling up. What's going on? Why is my card declined? Did you do something? I let it ring. The lawyer handled the rest. Paperwork filed. Notices sent. Custody proceedings initiated based on financial misconduct and instability. Every step felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body, calm and precise while my life detonated quietly. She showed up at the house that evening, panicked. "You can't do this," she said, voice shaking. "You're ruining my life." I looked at her and felt nothing. No rage. No sadness. Just distance. "You already did that," I replied. She cried. She yelled. She accused me of betrayal, of being heartless, of overreacting. At one point she said, "I never thought you'd go this far." That was the moment I knew I'd finally taken my power back. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be fair. I was being just. And once consequences replaced manipulation, the balance of our marriage shifted permanently whether she was ready for it or not. The aftermath wasn't loud the way movies make it seem. It was quiet. Administrative. Brutal in a slow, suffocating way that she was completely unprepared for. Her lover vanished first. One day she was texting him constantly, pacing the house, whispering angrily into her phone. The next, she was staring at the screen in disbelief. "He's not answering," she said to me, like I was supposed to care. I didn't respond. Later, I found out he'd blocked her the moment lawyers and police got involved. The man she'd risked everything for disappeared the second there were consequences. Watching that realization hit her was painful, not because I felt sorry for her, but because it confirmed how disposable she'd been to him. Then the truth started spreading. Court documents don't lie, and they don't protect feelings. Family members who once praised her reached out to me quietly, confused and horrified. Friends stopped calling her. Invitations dried up. The narrative she'd relied on, that she was misunderstood, stressed, justified, collapsed under actual evidence. She tried to rewrite the story anyway. Told people I was controlling. That I was abusive with money. That I was punishing her for emotional mistakes. But every accusation fell flat once timelines, statements, and numbers entered the conversation. I sat through hearings listening to strangers dissect my marriage like a case study. Dates. Transfers. Intent. Pattern. The judge didn't raise their voice. Didn't scold. Just listened and then ruled. In my favor. Financial control restored. Assets secured. Custody granted based on stability and documented behavior. The gavel didn't slam dramatically, but the sound it made echoed in my chest. She looked at me afterward like she didn't recognize me. "You really let this happen," she whispered. I wanted to say 100 things. Instead, I said nothing. Because watching her lose everything she thought she'd stolen without consequence didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity finally working. As I walked out of that building, paperwork in hand, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't the end of her fall. It was just the moment she understood it was real. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday afternoon that felt strangely ordinary. No thunder. No dramatic music. Just a clerk sliding papers across a desk and saying, "You're all set." I signed my name, stood up, and realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. That surprised me. 4 months, my life had been fueled by adrenaline, survival mode, strategy, containment. I thought once it ended, I'd collapse. Instead, I felt lighter. Like something toxic had finally drained out of my system. The house felt different after she moved out. Quieter. Cleaner. Not just physically, emotionally. I slept through the night for the first time in ages. The constant hum of anxiety in my chest faded into something manageable. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped bracing for the next lie. Rebuilding didn't happen overnight. Trust didn't magically return. But I learned to trust myself again, my instincts, my boundaries, my right to ask questions. I took control of my finances, my schedule, my future. Every decision felt intentional instead of reactive. People asked if I missed her. I missed who I thought she was. I missed the version of my life I believed I was building. But I didn't miss being used, gaslit, or slowly drained while being told it was love. One night, weeks later, I sat alone on the couch and logged into my bank account. Everything was exactly where it should be. No unexplained transfers. No quiet theft. Just clarity. Control. Peace. That's when it hit me. She didn't just lose access to my money. She lost access to me. I didn't win because I took everything legally, though I did. I won because I walked away knowing I didn't stay silent. I didn't excuse the inexcusable. I didn't let betrayal redefine my worth. She thought my trust made me weak. What she never understood was that the moment I stopped giving it blindly, was the moment I became untouchable.